Welcome back to Introduction to Engineering Design. This is Module 4.1, and today what we're working on is assembling our model cubes. Now the sample that I'm working on is downloadable on your Canvas page. It's called the 4.1 sample.zip, and it has all the part files that I'm going to work on if you want to practice on a model other than your own. But this is based upon the class example model. So let's go ahead and start this process. So we're going to make an assembly, and in SOLIDWORKS an assembly is really nothing more than an association where SOLIDWORKS builds a second file called an assembly file that associates all of your part files in a geometric configuration. So that's an important thing to remember. The first thing to think about when we talk about this is that the association of the files is important. So once you build your assembly, you have to be very careful to not alter that file structure or your assembly will break. So we'll talk a little bit more on that, how we'll submit our files so that we don't break that association. So let's get started with a new assembly, and we're going to click on File, New, and we'll open up our assembly window. Now if you have the Advanced tab selected for some reason, it'll look a little different, but you have the same basic thing. So let's go to the Novice tab, New Assembly, OK. The very first thing it asks us is it asks us to begin an assembly, what part do you want to start with? What part do you want to insert? So I'm going to browse to the location where my puzzle pieces reside. And I'm going to put piece number 1 in first. It doesn't really matter the sequence. I'm just going to put piece 1 in because it's easy and it works for me. So let's look at how this piece would go in. So I happen to have my file over here that shows the layout for this puzzle. And here it is. You'll see this piece lies on the bottom flat and the U shape opens up in that direction. So back over where my mouse cursor is flashing. So let's orient this part in that fashion. So the way I can orient it is I can come up here and choose to rotate the part about either the X, the Y, or the Z dimension or direction. And that's about the axis. So when I click on Y, it spins around the Y axis. When I pick on X, it spins around the X, and likewise for Z. So first let's rotate it to get it flat in the X axis. Now what I want to do is make the open part face away from me. So I'm going to click on the Y axis here a couple times. So I'm going to click on the Y button and make it go around, and there it is. That's the right orientation. Now once I have the proper orientation for the first part, I want to use the check mark to place it at the origin. If I just click and drop it, it's going to drop it someplace other than the origin, wherever I am in my model space. And it's always best to drop it at the origin within your model space for your assembly. It makes it a lot easier later on if we're going to bring this project into some other format, or we're going to combine assemblies to have a good solid origin. So let's start here by dropping and clicking the check mark OK. That drops it at the origin. You'll see it drops, and there's my first part. So I've got a total of 5 pieces. So I'm going to bring the pieces in one at a time. And the next piece I'm going to bring in is this brown piece number 2. So again, I will navigate to Insert Components, Browse, and I'm going to choose piece 2. Open. Now this one I don't really care how it orients, so I'm just going to drop it. And let's look over here at the model tree here. Over here in my Future Manager, in the design tree, you'll notice that there's an F by the first part that I dropped in, which was this red piece. If I try and grab it, it won't move. That F means that it is fixed. It is fixed in space. So I can click any part and I can fix it in space. So this piece, piece number 2, is obviously floating. Now if I wanted to fix it right where it was, I could go fix it. Now that's not a good way to assemble models, so we're not going to do that. I'm going to right click and go float again, and I'm going to assign this some constraints. So remember our classroom discussion about the 6 degrees of freedom. We're going to constrain 3 surfaces to each other, an X, a Y, and a Z. So let's start by going to our Assembly tab, Mate button. And I'm going to choose first the bottom of my piece 2, and I'm going to align it to the bottom of piece 1. Now you'll notice that I've chosen the coincident mate, and it did it for me. But I could make it parallel as well, or perpendicular, but I want coincident. You'll also notice that I can change my mate alignment down here. I can either align them, meaning both faces go the same direction, or I could go anti-aligned, meaning that the faces face each other, so they're touching. So I want them facing the same direction. You'll also notice that on this pop-up that follows my mouse around, well, it's actually in the workspace, I have these same commands here: perpendicular, lock, distance. A lot of mates we'll talk about here in a minute, but this is the flip mate alignment. So watch when I do that, you'll see the mate alignment tab moves. Once I'm happy with it, I can accept it with the green icon here, the green icon on my workspace, or the green icon on my mate tab. I select it and the mate stays active. So what I've done here is I've mated this so that it stays in plane at the bottom. So next let's go ahead and mate up so this end aligns inside the socket. We'll accept that, and now you'll notice that I can really only move this back and forth now. So the next mate, the third mate that I need to make this piece fixed, and notice the minus symbol, meaning it still is floating, is I need to mate the inside edge here to the inside edge of my U channel. Once I do that, my part is fully constrained. Now I'm going to exit the mates, and you're going to notice two things. First of all, the minus symbol went away on piece 2. Secondly, it says fully defined in my model space. So that's how I know that I'm fully mated and I'm in good shape. So let's get moving a little bit faster and insert the other components here. So the next component that's going to come in, I'm going to drop in the yellow piece, which is piece 4. And we'll go ahead and open that up. And you ask yourself, well, how does piece 4 go in? Well, let's look at this real quick. The way that piece 4 sits in this model is almost the way that it's in right now. My edge, or my surface here, mates to the surface there. So let's go ahead and do those mates. You'll notice that I choose mates, they appear in the window. And let's say I choose the wrong mate, or I choose something weird. I can always come up here, right-click, and either clear selections or delete a selection. I'm going to clear the selections and start over. You'll notice that I'm still in a coincident mate, and I accept it. My next mate is I want to line up these two edges, the back sides, and then have the bottom of the yellow touch the top of the red. And that is an anti-aligned mate. Now I'm coming a little bit further. If we look, you can see my model starting to take place. So let's drop the green piece in now. I'll exit my mate tab, and I'm going to go ahead and insert components, and now I'm going to browse, and I'm going to pick the remaining pieces. Piece 3, I'll hold my control key down, and piece 5, and you'll notice that I can drop them in 1 and then 2. Piece 3 sits in this corner right here, so it kind of just drops down in that corner. So let's do those mates real quick. Again, mate button on the assembly tab. Choose the first surface, which is the outside edge of my green, the outside edge of my red. I want them coincident and aligned. Accept it. Second surface, this outside edge of my green to the outside edge of the red. Accept it. Third surface would be the bottom of the green to the top of the red. Accept it. So you can kind of see how fast this goes. Now, students sometimes struggle with this concept, and this is, we really don't have to insert the part in the orientation it's going to end up in the model, because that's what mating does for you. So if you look at this piece, you'll see that it rotates. Basically, it'll rotate around this way, and the back edge here will align with the back edge there. So let me do that. But you'll notice when I first clicked that, it went anti-aligned. I want those two aligned, so it flips back over. Now I'll accept that mate and come over and align that edge in the bottom of my blue to the top of my yellow. And I've just made my model. All right. Now sometimes you'll get it say underdefined when it really isn't. You just have to regenerate your model here. So there we are. We are fully mated, and if I grab any piece, it won't pop out of here. So looks good to me. And let me go ahead and save this. And I'm going to save this in the same folder as the assembly. You see I've already been in there and done this once. In there I've got it saved. That's it. That's an assembly. Thanks for watching.